Starfield from Bethesda definitely is not a bad game. But if that's our standard for a hit or even a masterpiece, how some media outlets call it, we have a serious dissent on how a masterpiece is defined. A masterpiece sets new standards and appeals even to players far beyond the confines of its genre. After a fair amount of gameplay, I fail to see where Starfield would achieve this. A hit, on the other hand, performs exceptionally well within the known limits of the genre and technology. Starfield doesn't. I'd rather describe the situation like this. What we got is the best Bethesda could squeeze out of the creation engine, which is a respectable success, but far from being a masterpiece. It's an ambitious endeavor that feels and plays like a 5-year-old game based on 10-year-old tech. A Frankenstein of Fallout 3, Skyrim, and Fallout 76. If you're a fan of these games, you'll be happy. Very happy even. And that's fine. Starfield improved the combat and keeps the rest. Problem for most other people though is, the rest isn't up to standard or far from the expectations raised by trailers and announcements from Todd Howard. Let's first talk about Starfield's biggest constraint, the playfield composition, and how you traverse it. The most common encounter in the game aren't spacers or pirates, but loading screens. Leave a building, loading screen. Travel between districts, loading screen. Enter ship, loading screen. Bethesda made the same mistakes as EA did a while ago. Remember when they forced the Frostbite engine upon every studio they own? A shooter engine, at that time not even able to save a game state or manage a party inventory. Had to be repurposed for role-playing games like Dragon Age or looter shooters like Anthem. The wheel had to be reinvented by each dev team again. This fact most probably chewed away precious development time needed somewhere else and reduced the overall quality of these games. It was the wrong tool for the job. The same applies to the creation engine and Starfield. Games like No Man's Sky proved 7 years ago that even small teams are able to create games with seamless transitions between space and planets and only sporadic loading screens overall. That's possible if the underlying technology allows for it. The creation engine obviously doesn't. Which brings me to the next historically strong point of Bethesda RPGs, immersion. You always had the feeling you were part of a living, dynamic world, even despite the fact these worlds weren't really dynamic after all. But the illusion was there. Starfield, on the other hand, feels like you're in a small box most of the time, even though technically the game is gigantic compared to its predecessors. Again, the constant loading screens are the culprit. But why is that? Other games have loading screens as well, but they feel less intrusive to immersion. I suspect it's because how we perceive traveling and the change of scenes. If there only were loading screens while leaving a planet and when we travel between star systems, most people wouldn't mind. These are major locational changes where we mostly accept loading screens. They only really hurt if they appear on minor scene transitions. The biggest immersion breakers are situations like traveling between districts, where they first show a cutscene, how the tram leaves, and then switch to the by now very familiar black loading screen. Even docking on a station results in a loading screen. First we dock via cutscene. Then we leave the ship and the station loads. Why can't the ship dock in-game if the station needs to be loaded afterwards anyways? I bet Bethesda would have handled the situation in another way if not for engine constraints. Eventually, everything combined results in a very fragmented game flow that still throws me off after 30 in-game hours. We now could ask the question why this bothers a lot of people so much. Well, we've got a game at hand that made the promise to make us feel the vastness of space. A ton of Han Solo and Firefly hype. The symbiosis of likable characters and their cool starships everyone loves. Problem is, what's the vehicle good for if there's nothing to traverse with it? Flying your spaceship is just a minuscule portion of the game. On top of that, there's no feeling of vastness as you're confined to small boxy areas of space most of the time. A Redditor expressed this wouldn't bother him, because first and foremost, Starfield is an RPG. And he sees your own ship more as a movable base than anything else. So all he wants is an efficient and comfortable way to travel the galaxy. No need to have a lot of control over the vessel. While the RPG and movable base argument is alright, I support that, the third one has a glaring flaw. What Starfield offers to us is far from efficient. Traveling from one system to another requires navigating a clunky map to set your destination and click the Warp Me There button. The whole process is accompanied by several loading screens. Question is, could there be a more convenient way? Well, I can remember a rather insignificant space game they might have easily overlooked with the same setup. Like you had a crew and a ship that was more of a mobile base than a movable object within the game world, and most of the action took part on planets or stations. I think it was called Mass Effect and had a simple, efficient and comfortable point-and-click map to direct your ship towards different locations. Sometimes less is more, it seems. Which is especially true for Starfield, because beyond the issues I just mentioned, Starfield's most pronounced marketing object, the massive world, turns out to be its biggest flaw. The procedurally generated exploration aspect is boring and reduced to scan animals, plants and resources over and over again. Most points of interest also are auto-generated, and the few handcrafted areas quickly begin to repeat once you start to explore the hundreds of planets which are not part of any quest. And since there are no dynamic factions to be found anywhere, your actions don't matter in the end. The problem is, things changed a lot since the release of Skyrim, which easily became the open world reference back in 2011. Games like Breath of the Wild, The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2 came along and built upon the proven formula. Starfield's fragmented open world can't compete with the immersion and consistency of these games mentioned. The quality of an open world isn't just defined by its size, but rather by how well its substructures are interconnected to form a believable playfield, which is more than the sum of its parts. To have this happen, you need meaningful parts and proper connections, which Starfield mostly lacks. As a result, another Redditor said, "Instead of a vast universe, Starfield really just feels like a room full of doors." In the end, it's a great vision constricted by its dated and unsuitable engine. Which is a shame because the concept and partly the execution is undoubtedly excellent. The artwork, factions, world building, everything. So if you take it for what it is, Skyrim in space without branching storylines, it's still an enjoyable experience. If that's what you're after, go ahead. Also, you can be certain about one thing. Armies of modders from all over the planet know the creation engine like the back of their hands. They've probably already begun to transform and expand every aspect of the game. A 2025 modded version of Starfield will very likely be a whole other, way better game. But in its current state, all what we have is a good RPG with interesting skills set in a static, fragmented world telling an average main story. In its entirety, Starfield feels a bit stale and far below its potential. While playing, I always felt busy but seldom captivated. Maybe Bethesda finds enough ambition to replace the creation engine for its next big installment, so that Starfield hopefully is the last of its kind. And its successor may get the chance to really reach for the stars, instead of, again, feeling like the Expanse ordered from Wish. Thanks for watching and see you soon, somewhere between air, land, sea and space.